This is the UX Ladder, Conversations Beyond Pixels, a deep dive into product cultures, inclusion, and the untold stories that shape experiences and trends. I am so excited to introduce you. You are not only a remarkable UX researcher who is currently in the gaming industry, but you're this incredible human that I have had the privilege to work with, to know, and now call my friend, who is one of the most thoughtful people I know. In that, you always think of the space around people, and you always consider where are they coming from, what might be making them answer in a certain way, not just in your work as a researcher, because, like I said, you're this amazing senior researcher, but you also do it in your day-to-day interactions, which is why I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you. So first and foremost, hello. All right, I'm going to introduce you a little bit. Are you ready to be put on the spot?
All right. Yes, ready.
All right, so here is Dària, a remarkable UX researcher who's worked in a lot of industries and is currently in the gaming industry as a senior UX researcher at PlayStation. Your journey, though, began in academia, and as I was just mentioning, your natural gift for understanding people and products has seen you through all of this work. Your intelligence, curiosity, and structured approach make you, not only an exceptional researcher and human, but also a mentor. Originally from Spain, what sets you apart is your dedication and self-starter attitude. When you commit to something, I've really seen that you will be sure that you'll see it through the end, whether it was the move from academia all the way to working in products, whether it was changing industries, or also whether it's tasks that you do for yourself. Like, for example, I know that you just led a very large Burning Man camp, which is no small feat. And you're new-ish to Burning Man, right? Like, you've been going. What burn was this for you?
I think that was the fourth, so 4 years, still new.
Well, yeah, I mean, compared to like some folks we know, right, who've been going every year on year, but the amount of organization it takes to lead a camp is a lot. So I am going to circle back to that. But before we do that, I do want to call out, something that I've come back to again and again. We were working at that time together, and one of the company values was getting things done. And you didn't miss a single beat before raising your hand in front of a room full of folks from different levels, different teams, and you clearly said it's not just about getting things done, it's about getting them done the right way. And years later, I have to tell you, I still quote this because it so perfectly encapsulates the way things should be, but it also really is a great reminder of your approach to work in life. So, as I was saying, apart from all of this, outside of your professional life, you're quite an adventurer. You're a world traveler with a true sense of wanderlust, an avid gamer. You also walk like literally everywhere. I know, for folks listening, I'll meet Dària for coffee, and I was like, "Oh, how's it going? How'd you get here?" And Dària will say, "Oh, I just walked like across town." I was like, okay. And as I was mentioning, you most recently led your own Burning Man camp, so lots of interest and like I said, the wanderlust attitude and the let's live life attitude is so real in you. But despite all of these many things that you continue to accomplish, you really strike me as someone who's humble and genuine. You're not afraid to give feedback or get feedback as well. And I've always found that you're striving to help improve yourself, but also to improve others. In short, you're not just a colleague, but an inspiration. And your combination of professional excellence and personal authenticity makes you someone that I'm proud to have worked with, to know, and honestly, everyone should fucking know you. So, Dària, my first question after all of that said is tell me about your burn. How large was your camp?
Oh well, before that, thanks so much, Mariam. That was a really really nice intro. Thank you. I really appreciate it, and I'm also really excited to be doing this with you, and just like in general, also catching up. So thanks again. And yeah, the burn. I mean, it's always an experience, right? There was definitely a lot of work that had been going on for the whole year before we actually got there. And when we got there, it was actually no rain, which was nice. And it was pretty mild weather. So it was just amazing to be back there. And one of my favorite things I probably mentioned is just biking around and kind of like being in this like giant surrealist kind of museum experience. So it was amazing to be back with, my friends, which is an important part of doing that as well. So,
Yeah, for sure. And how large was this camp that you were leading?
mm. so I we're part of a village, and the village is probably like 100, like 60 to 100 people. And the camp that I'm part of, that I help, one of my best friends kind of like get it going this year, is probably around 26, between 26 and 30. And this year we had like a lot of new people that were coming in, so it was a lot of like, helping them understand, how the experience is, mentoring them, so that they could take on like lead roles and help us, bring the experience there. So there was, yeah, a lot of kind of like, yeah, bringing new people and helping them thrive in that environment as well, which was really really rewarding to see.
What is one word that you would use to describe bringing together an experience for some 30 some people?
Mm, I think there are a couple of words that come to mind. So one is definitely challenging, but the other one is like almost it's rewarding. And yeah, I would say rewarding, because one of my favorite things, that it clicked last year. I think it was the first year that I brought an offering to, I was in charge of like creating an experience there, and I had this idea, right? But once I got there, I had all my friends helping me realize that idea. And that was one of the most rewarding things that I've experienced, right? Like I've never had that of like, okay, I had an idea, but we're all co-creating that idea, right? And like I could see
Yeah,
parts that change because someone took their own, way of doing something. So it was, yeah, challenging but really rewarding experience.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
All right, I'm going to switch gears as you are probably used to. That I want to start by really talking about your professional journey. As you came into frankly moving, which is a thing in itself, I know that you went to UC Berkeley, you got a degree over there. Um, in all of that, how did you realize that research was the path for you?
Mhm. So it happened, I think it happened when I was at Berkeley. So when I moved to San Francisco, I decided that I wanted to pursue psychology, right? And at the time, I wasn't really sure about, like, I didn't know that cognitive science existed. So when I got into Berkeley, I discovered this like cognitive science field, right? And by doing some sort of like an internship with like a group of like therapists and being part of like the Berkeley culture, which had like a very research heavy, like it was very research heavy there. There were a lot of labs that were doing a lot of really cool research. I started thinking that maybe becoming a therapist was not really what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to focus more on doing research. So I started, joining labs at Berkeley and then working with PhD students in the research projects that they were leading. So I think that that's when I discovered this like, oh, research is actually really cool, right? You get to explore a problem that you are interested in, hopefully, and then you need to be creative in the ways that you are trying to find answers to that problem, right? Or to that thing that you're trying to understand. So I think that that is when it started, like that interest. And then when I graduated, I was like, well, I'm a poor student, recently graduated, not much experience besides other random jobs I've done in my life. What options are out there? And then it's when I discovered UX research. I was like, okay, I think that my skills kind of fit pretty well with this, and it has research, so why not? So I think that that's when I decided to give it a try and see if that's something that I would enjoy and that I would be good at.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. That something that I think a lot about is just in general what it's like to move to another country, what it's like to sort of settle and figure life out here, especially what to study, how to live without necessarily having the support of a parent or like the network how was that for you? You know, when you moved here, when you decided to study, did you have any family members or parents or siblings, anyone involved in these decisions giving you advice?
Um, I did not. The only person that I had as my support system was like my partner. And I remember that that was one of the key people in my like education, like in like getting me through, helping me go through education, right? Because I remember the first time, like when I moved to San Francisco, I went to City College for 2 years, and that was the first time since I was in high school that I was writing in English. I had never written in English. I could speak it because I had been speaking English for like 10 years with like my partner and my flatmates, but I was like, now I need to write essays. And, like having
Yeah,
my partner sit with me and proofread the essays with me and kind of like help me become better at like, expressing myself. That was really key. But it also felt like really like a lonely experience because I was, like a bit older than my other college students at the time. And, we had very different kind of lives as well. So for me, the educational journey was pretty like a solo one, right? I had a couple of like
yeah,
important connections, but it was mostly like, I know I want to do this, I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to go through it, right? So,
yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I definitely want to just take a moment to recognize that it's hard, man, when you move to another country, and especially if you haven't necessarily, not only are you learning a new system, but then you don't necessarily have a typical network the way other folks might. So how has it been as you have moved into the research industry and are clearly recognized as a leader and a mentor and have done pretty well? How has it been for you as a working professional? And do your parents even know what you do, for instance? Like, do you ever talk to them about it?
so I think that it's a bit hard to explain what I do. So I think that my mom has a sense for what I do and my brother as well, but it's not as well understood as it is with like my close immediate circle here, right? That we are surrounded by tech, right? And we're surrounded by people who work in tech that has this like positions. Like with my family, is it's not the case, right? So I think that they kind of have a sense for it, and I think that they get excited that I work at PlayStation. So they're like, "Oh, Dad, Daria works at PlayStation. She works at gaming, right?" But besides that, yeah, there is always like a little bit of a disconnect and not being able to share a lot of the things that I experience and that I go through with them, right? Because we live in very
Yeah,
different worlds. And yeah, my grandparents, yeah, it's like completely no. I don't think they have a clue on what I do. So
yeah. And I have a lot of empathy for that because you're right, it's such a different world. What about coming and settling abroad and living an American life? Have they are they curious about it? Do you wish you could share more? I'm wondering about that.
yeah, I think they are. I think like they never said it, but I think that there is this kind of like view of someone that has moved abroad, has gotten an education, and works in the industry, right? So they potentially see me as someone that um, hopefully is living a good life. They also feel like I know that my grandmother feels always very worried that I don't have like a support network here, but I'm like, I have a lot of friends and people that I've met and I've built these relationships. So don't worry about that. So there is also like this like idea of like, oh yeah, she's doing well, but at the same time, is she doing well? Like, does she have like, the chosen family that she wants to have? So yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're the only person from your family that's made this move, right?
Yeah, my brother lived abroad for a couple of years, but he moved back. So yeah, I think that, and my aunt as well. But most of my family are still in Spain. So
What was your motivator?
mostly my partner. So we were living, well, two things. So we were living in Bristol, which is a city, like a small city-ish, close to London, and weather is really shitty. So I was like, fun. And at the time, my partner got a job offer, and that was like for a startup here in San Francisco. And he at the time was like a software engineer, so he was like, you know what, I always wanted to go to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, kind of like be a part of that. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. I don't necessarily have anything in Bristol that is like keeping me here. And at the time there, it was also hard to find, our own circle and connections and kind of like community. So we decided to just make the change and move here. And when I think about it, it's like I was pretty young. So I think I was
Mhm.
23. It's been, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Well, selfishly speaking, obviously, I'm glad you're here, but it sounds like it's been a positive move. There
Mhm.
were twists and turns, but overall, it's been a good move, it sounds like.
Yes, definitely. I feel like, well, there are a lot of things that I miss about Europe and like European lifestyle, and I definitely
Yeah.
would like to be a part of my family's day-to-day life more. I feel like here I've have found, my community and my kind of like my space. So yeah, I definitely feel like it was the right decision.
That's awesome. There is though something to be said, because I, much like you, San Francisco's home to me, but I always will feel like I'm living in two worlds. It's very much a context switch that happens, or when you even pick up the phone and you talk, and that sort of, I wouldn't say struggle, but that sort of reality is true.
So
Um, so, speaking of shifts, talk to me about your move from academia to product. What was that like, and what motivated it?
so it was an interesting move, right? Because like especially at the time, and a challenging move, right? Because at the time, like I was coming fresh out of college. San Francisco was really challenging to even get your first foot in, especially as a recent graduate with not a lot of like experience working in tech, right, or in product. So it was a definitely like challenging experience, and I feel like for me, I wanted to try it out, right? Because I wasn't sure I wanted to commit to academia yet. Like at the time, I saw that if you have a particular area that you're very interested in, then academia can be a great space, right? Because you get to go deep into a particular area and dedicate all your time to that. And at the time, I wasn't ready for that commitment. I was like, you know
Mm.
what? I need some more time to figure out if I have something that I'm truly interested in and what that is, right? So that was like part of, what fueled me to look elsewhere outside of academia. I had also been in college and academic settings for many, many years. So I felt like it was time for me to change a bit, try something new. And also it was the factor of like, the very obvious thing, like I need to pay my bills, right? I need to be able
Yeah. San
to.
Francisco, man. I hear you.
So I was like, I need to look and see if there is anything that can help me, sustain myself.
Yeah.
Because at the time I had been, my partner had been helping me a lot. And that was like a situation that, while I'm super grateful, it's not the situation I wanted to be in. I wanted
Yeah.
to, independent financially. So I feel like there were a couple of reasons that kind of like nudged me into explore, what else is there in product. And then once I got the opportunity, it was also like a shift in mentality, right? Like on like
Yeah.
how do we do academic research? How do we scope it? How do we run it? How do we present it? And then how does this work in tech companies and product? Right. One of the things that I realized really quickly was like no one had time to read my very lengthy reports. Right. Like I feel one of the first projects that I did was like super long, report, like going really deep into understanding our users and their motivations and all of that. And then I remember like very few people read it. And months later, very few people remembered the things that I said on that report. And
Mm.
then I was like, well, what is the point of me doing all this work and this research if people will not remember it and therefore will
Yeah.
not use it, right? So it quickly changed my way of like approaching research within product, right? It's like the academic way does not work. I need to find other ways
Yeah.
that are succinct, more to the point, and that thinks about your stakeholders and your coworkers, right? Who are very
Yeah.
immersed to their own worlds, and they don't have the time to, go through all of these research findings. Um,
Mm. Yeah, no, you're so right, right? Because like the product world, especially when you're working, I mean, actually, that's not true because I was about to say, especially when you work for a small company, but even in large companies, it's very fast paced. And this idea where everyone is aspiring to this world where you iterate and learn as you go and you figure it out as you go. So I want to learn more about how you lead research. Now, you worked in a couple of different places. Now, right now, you're at PlayStation. Before this, you were at Earnest, which is personal finance and lending. Has there been have you had to like learn and adapt and research and present research in different ways between these two very different industries?
I think that one of the things that I noticed is like that kind of like changed the way that I do research is that at Ernest I was the only researcher, right? Like kind of like almost only researcher. So I
You are
was
the only researcher.
so I was like I felt like there was a lot of things that I was doing that are very different than the things that I do now, right? Right now the team that I'm part of, we are like I don't even know, like I think like we're probably almost close to 20, right? 20 with like people at different levels. So I have people who are leads who have much more experience, like leads, staff, researchers, and then I have there's people that are more like new to being a researcher, right? So that definitely changes the way in which I um, plan for research. I
Mm.
work with other researchers to get the research done. Like sometimes there is a lot of like certain instead of like in the past, like I was thinking about like all the potential research that we could do and kind of like just kicking it off on my own and getting it done. Now it's a different process, right? So now potentially I can come up with a couple of research projects, but these research projects sometimes might need to be resourced, right? So they need to be handed on to someone else for them to do, right? So that requires me to also have like a handoff process, right? And be able to help them understand what we need to do and help them if they need to run the study, right? Which there are pros and cons. Like in the past, I felt very like self-sufficient, and it was really quickly for me to be like, oh, there's this research, I'm just gonna jump to it and start doing it, right? Now there is a little bit more process that it's there. Ideally, we would be able to run more projects in parallel, right? And be faster at the end instead of having to run it all on my own. But yeah, that sometimes feels like it can feel like a little bit more like process. So there is an adjustment that happens there. In terms of like differences based on industry, I'm trying to think if there is anything. So one of the things that I've noticed is like the gaming industry is a very secretive industry, right? Like there are so many things that we need to be very careful on, like which kind of research we run, how we run it, who we invite to this research. This is something that I didn't have that big of an issue when I was working at Ernest, right? Like we could talk about a lot of stuff, and some of this was difficult topics, right? Because we were discussing like debt and like financial hardships. Um, but we didn't have this like inability to discuss certain things just because we were designing for something, right? So I feel like there
Mm.
has to be also a change in like thinking, oh, can I run this survey or can I ask this question? Am I disclosing something that I shouldn't disclose? Things like that, which yeah require a little bit more like being
Yeah,
careful how you plan and what kind of research you do.
got it. Thank you so much for saying that, because moving within industries isn't necessarily easy. And especially when you're in IC and in a senior IC role, there's a lot of not just the context switching, which is hard enough, but there's also just a lot of process switching that you have to get used to between large and small companies and secretive, not secretive, and all of that. And I've seen a lot of people struggle through it because it's not easy. But you seem to be able to do it so seamlessly. How do you do that? Like how do you sort of sit back and say, oh, now this is a new process. Now I have to do this versus I could like obviously you bring your own flavor to everything, but your one of your superpowers I've always recognized is you take the feedback, you figure it out. You're like, oh, they're used to doing it this way, and then whatever's wrong, you point it out. But then whatever's working well, you make it even better. How do you do that so seamlessly?
You make it sound much more seamless. I don't. I feel I feel like I've always been good at adapting, and as I said, like if I see something that is that could be optimized, right, or something that I actually disagree in the way that is being done, I will always say it. I feel like I'm pretty straight to the point when I feel like I disagree.
Yeah.
With but I feel like one of the things that made the change really easy for me was that gaming has always been a huge part of my life, right? I always wanted to work in gaming. And when this opportunity came up, I was like, I need to take it. So I feel like being able to work with like something that allows people to play, right? And something that I'm passionate about and something that I can just talk about video games with my coworkers all the time, right? It creates this environment that is like you're excited about it and you're ready to put the work to make it work, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
that help. And I think that one of the things that I like to do as well when I join in a company is we kind of like talk to a lot of people and start getting a sense for like how do people like to work or how do people actually
Mm.
do certain things, right? So kind of like getting your senses out there and kind of getting a
Yeah.
sense for like maybe this group functions in this way, but maybe this group functions in this way, or maybe that individual, right? So I kind of like to read the company in the same way that I'm reading teams or reading an individual, right? Because at the end of the day, um, you know, we want to be able to go I want to be able to go to work feeling like I don't need to like put all my armor and try to go and like fight with my coworkers, right? So making an effort to understand how other
Yeah.
people do things, and like trying to adjust where you feel that it's right to adjust, I think that it will be hopefully a win-win situation for everyone, right? um,
Yeah.
so
I love that you're literally UX researching your
mhm,
teams and the company, which is such a healthy way to look at it, right? Because it's really easy to come in and say, I know best, and I do it this way and do it that way. And you're clearly, as I said a little bit ago, you're clearly a leader in the field. And the fact that you're bringing it into your daily life and adjusting makes so much sense. It just makes for such a healthier way to work. And you're coming in with this like sort of empathy, not sort of, but you're coming in with empathy to say, let me figure out what they're doing before you go in and say, all of this sucks.
exactly.
Which I really appreciate and want to take a minute to appreciate as well. So
Yeah.
I want to go back to your comment about being a gamer. You're an avid gamer, and I've been in many conversations on the peripheral because I do not game. um, but you're an avid gamer, and I know that's something you wanted to change for many years. I haven't relented just yet. But and now your work is focused in that space. What is it like working, bringing something you love in your personal life or a hobby and your profession together?
It's actually it's actually great, because I don't necessarily work in the research that happens with the games itself, right? Those are different teams. So the research that I do focuses on the PlayStation as the experience itself. So the experience when you put your console and you navigate through your console, when you use all the features in your console, and also hardware, right? Like the controllers, the PlayStation, all of that. So I feel like it's been great for a couple of reasons. So when I work with my other coworkers, we get to talk about all of these things. Right? We get to talk about like the video games that we're playing. We get to discuss things that for a long time that I didn't necessarily have like a community of people to talk about these
Mm,
things with, right? So it's really fun to be able to do that, and to be able to do that like on a regular basis with people who you might not have, a strong personal connection with. So I feel like it's also a way to connect with others, right? When I
yeah.
started PlayStation, one of the questions that I was asking, my coworkers when I first met them is like, so are you playing any games? What games are you playing? What do you like about those games, right? Because it establishes a common ground for us to talk about stuff, and a way to connect as well, right? So that
Yeah.
I really and then when I when I run research with participants, I love talking about games, right? So to chat with like younglings, like people who are like in their, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years old. And then we talk about games. And it's really fun to see how young people are, like playing. What are some of the like the language that they use when they play? I've learned so many new terms that I was like, I had no idea you could use the term sweaty to refer to someone, when playing. So I feel like there is so much fun around, being
Yeah.
able to do these interviews and this research and learning about around a topic that I actually care about. So yeah, so far it's been pretty sweet.
I have to ask, what does sweaty mean in the gaming
Oh,
world?
well, I'm not an expert, but so there are these types of players when they play like Fortnite and types of shooters that sometimes they get really like hardcore mode, right? Like they are very very sweaty. So other players might refer to these players that go in like very hardcore mode like as sweaty, right? So
Ah, oh
yeah,
God, I sound like such a grandma right now, don't I?
yeah. I feel sometimes in the interviews that I run.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And you're so right. Like your personal life, and apart from loving something just in your personal life, it's just we spend as adults, especially in America, so much of our working time doing work or thinking about work, and such is also the life of when you work in tech. Um, and I appreciate and love for you that you are surrounded by fellow nerds and get to interview fellow nerds. All of that said, though, between gaming, which can be delightful, but there's also like difficult parts about gaming, right? As they are about finance and personal lending. Because, like for example, and Ernest, we were obviously happy to be in an industry that was trying to sort of break barriers and get people through college. I know for me, if I didn't have personal loans, I wouldn't even be in America. Um, but there also are difficult moments, right, where the debt problem is real, where like gaming communities have some very dark things that happen. As a researcher, uh, how do you cope when people tell you really difficult things, and how do you move through that? Because it's difficult. Not everyone can do this work and still get through an interview the way you do.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's I feel that the work that I did at Earnest helped me prepare for some of the more challenging conversations that I have with like players now, right?
Mm.
So I remember at Earnest, like it was really challenging because like people were talking about like things that have a huge impact in their lives, right? And their health, like
Right.
physical, mental. So I feel like a lot of the times, like I was having very difficult conversations with people and talking about very personal stuff, right? So I had to approach it with like I one of the things that I learned from you, I believe, is like starting a conversation and always saying, if I ever ask something that you don't feel comfortable sharing, please just let me know. You don't need to answer, things like that, making people feel like this is a safe space and
Mm.
you are the one that chooses how much you're going to give and share with me, right? Like you should never feel forced to share something with me just because I'm a researcher on the other side asking you questions. So I try to have like this very personal, safe spaces for people to kind of like share what they feel like they can share. And
Mm.
with gaming, it's the same, right? Like I I was actually working for the first 2 years at PlayStation within the what I call like we were exploring like social gaming, right? So I talked to a lot of players who play online multiplayer games, and it was really challenging and hard to talk to a lot
Yeah.
of women or people from minority groups that they feel harassed like almost on every interaction that they have with other players,
Well,
right? And this is really hard, and it made me really angry because it's like people are making the choice to not engage in these communities because other people are making the space feel unsafe for them, right? And it's really sad because gaming can be such a like a fun and a way to connect with others, right? So I feel like yeah, like Ernest prepared me for it, and I feel like me continuing to work in this space and having these players in mind when we're building
yeah.
things for the PlayStation or when we're thinking about like running research, right? Instead of like running research,
Yeah.
what we call like the stereotypical gamer, right? Which would be a young, usually white male. So it's like, okay, we need to talk to other people. So we understand, like what is that experience with this? Are we creating safe
Yeah.
spaces? And if not, what can we do so that they feel safe? And right now, I'm actually like, since very recently, like I started focusing a little bit more within like, how can we create these like safety and trust spaces, right? And if an incident happens, like how is PlayStation reacting to it? Like, are we keeping, these players accountable for their behavior? And if not, what are some of the things that we need to change so that this behavior is not taken as like, yeah, it goes, right? It's like a normal
Yeah.
thing to toxic environments. It's like, no. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's difficult, but I feel like hopefully, I'm in a position that I can raise my voice and be like, wait a second, let's think about all these people who are actually
Yeah.
not feeling like this is a safe space for them, right? So,
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really especially appreciate how you bring in this deep sense of empathy. And it's also, you talked a lot about minorities and how people who are just different from the majority might feel in these circumstances. And I want to know if there's a correlation between how you identify in your personal identity as a person of color, a name that is not necessarily common, a minority, immigrant, all the things, right? Has this affected how you go into these rooms and how you conduct yourself professionally?
yes, I think so. For a couple of things, right? So, I feel like, let me take a note so I don't forget. So, So one of the things is like when I play games, one of the things that always annoyed me that has changed over the last years is like how well represented you are in games, right? Like for
Yeah.
most of my life, when I played games, there was always like a male character as the main character, right? And I got really excited when I think it was like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That was one of the first games that I
Mm.
played that kind of allowed you to pick, would you want a male or a female? And that was already like a huge thing for me, right? I was like, yeah, I want to be able to feel represented. And I believe that these things have been happening because there are more women like me as well and other people who are saying no, we need to think about these things, we need to start bringing this like diverse points of view and diversity into the way we build games, the way we build consoles, the way we craft features and experiences so that more people feel like that's also an experience for them and they can feel engaged, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like even nowadays, like um sometimes like I have meetings with like the groups, the stakeholders or like the coworkers I work with, and I look in the room and I'm still sometimes the only woman there, right? So I feel like that made me even more like aware of like who I am and like how I identify myself, and also it made me feel more aware that I actually need to speak up and say these things. Like even with the smallest details of like if someone is making a presentation and they are adding pictures of gamers, like not real people, but just like, those pictures that you put in presentations. You need to make those diverse as well. You cannot just have like images of like the same looking person on all of
Yeah.
this. It's like that's not representative of what we're trying to build, and that's not what we want to communicate to the rest of the team of who are we building this for, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I've become much more sensitive to all of these things to be like, hey, no, we're building for a very diverse community. Like I feel like so many people play games, right?
Yeah.
And we're
For
still
sure.
part of it. And yeah, I feel like being yeah, definitely being a woman has like made it more accentuated that, and I feel like I'm being a bit more like not pushy but like a bit more like sharing my thoughts and my
Yeah.
from research when I'm in those meetings.
So I want to hear that back a little bit to you, because what I'm hearing from you is being quote unquote different from the majority in a room. Or sometimes you're the only woman, maybe sometimes you're the only person with an accent or whatever it might be. It, instead of feeling intimidated by that, you are actually sort of using that as your power and saying, well, no, we need to see more of me. And I love that. That is such a beautiful way to look at it and to maneuver from it. And it sounds like people are listening. Would you agree with that?
I hope so, yeah. And I feel like there is like a huge community of women at PlayStation as well that are like pushing for this. They're having like groups. They are doing like presentations, and they are really involved in the things that are happening within the company. And I think, and I want to hope that this is like something that is also happening across the industry. So I think that people are hearing, like all these people that are speaking up
Nice.
for more like inclusive and diverse experience. And I feel like yes. So that's my hope. And also I feel like to me it ended up being a lot of like the personal relationships that I have at work as well. The trust that you're able to create with someone so that you can tell them, no, I think that this, and this, or like be mindful of this and
Mm,
this. One of the things that happened is that I work with like a lot of stakeholders that are, if you look at the org chart, they are much more senior than me, right? They probably have like double the amount of experience, and they have been at the company the double the amount of time, right? So there is always the sense of like, oh, like, should I be saying this? Like, I've been here just like 2 months, right? But then I feel like, no, I mean, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, you need to speak up because like you can't speak up, right? So,
yeah. Yeah. I love that emphasis on no matter how much experience you have, or no matter what you look like, or sound like, or identify with, your words do matter and there is space for you. I really appreciate you calling that out because you're right. You're absolutely right. I want to zoom out for a second because you talked about industry, and I want to focus on the tech and the UX research industry at large, or the UX industry and tech at large in terms of representation. In your opinion, where is it headed and what do we need more than ever now?
I think I think that over the last couple of years, with UX, I think that it's probably, I don't know for sure, but I think that like in terms of like industry tech and UX, like it's been pretty diverse, maybe a little bit more than gaming for a little bit longer, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think that the trend are parallel, right? So they are
Yeah,
both getting more people from
nice.
different backgrounds, more people who identify in different ways. So I feel like the industries are becoming more diverse and more inclusive. I feel that we still have a long way to go,
Mm,
especially because there are still like you can see that slowly the positions that are maybe not in the leadership are like changing, or like certain positions within certain groups in like certain product areas are more diverse than others. But there are some that are still like a little bit, you know, homogeneous. So yeah, that's a word, right? So I feel like there is still room for improvement, and we need to continue to push, especially leadership positions, right? Because I've noticed that you can, if you have like someone in the leadership that supports you and supports the team and supports these ideals of like how we should function, what are some of the values that we should, strive for and to push for. So I feel like that makes change oftentimes much easier and possible, right? So I feel
yeah.
like I would love to see more women in, and more people like, uh, people from minorities, Black people in positions of power and leadership within PlayStation, but also other gaming industries, right? So I feel like, yeah, a lot of work has happened. A lot of lawsuits have happened within the late gaming industry as well that are pushing for change. But I think that we still have a way to go.
More to- I appreciate that. And you're right. There's always still a lot more to do. So thank you for pulling all of that out. Now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because from all of these answers, but then also just from all of the things I know about you, and have also just sort of been following your career path through the years. You're one of the most self-motivated people I've ever met. You're just you're very you do your research, no pun intended, you figure it out and think like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then you go about and do it. And something that I've always thought about is, you know, when you think about all the different things you do, from in terms of being an avid gamer to traveling to like getting more immersed in things like Burning Man or camping, um, what role do all of these things that you surround your life with what role do these things play in your life, and how does it fulfill you? I'd love for you to talk about that, because you're very career, to be more articulate, you're very focused on your career, and you've absolutely moved up and up, but you're also really focused on living this full life and having hobbies or like experiencing the world. Um, how do you balance it all? And talk to me about how you do all of these things in a way to fulfill you.
So yes, to me that's always been really important, right? Like I love my work. I love to be able to, be a part of what I'm doing. But to me, that's not the only thing, right? Life, it's comprised of other so much more that you can experience, right? So for me, like it does not only work to only focus on one thing. And I think that that's what pushed me to have all these other experiences, right? Like for me, I feel like my work sometimes it is creative, but it can be very analytical as well, right? Like you're
Mm,
thinking, sometimes thinking about a lot of stuff. And I feel like the
yeah.
hobbies that I surround myself with are different kind of creative outlets, right? So for example, like I really enjoy like Burning Man, right? For the um, whimsical and like creative art like experience, right? And I feel like that kind of like fulfills that like um different part of myself that maybe sometimes when I'm doing research and thinking very strategically and very like analytically, like okay, what do I need to do, how am I going to analyze this is something that maybe doesn't fit that, right? um so I think that that will be it. I feel like video games is the same, right? Like video games allows me to be immersed into a world that maybe is completely different than what I'm doing, right? So I feel like it also fits this like, creativity, this like mind expansiveness, right? That also I
Yeah.
bring to my work, and I'm like, oh, have we thought about these things, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like they kind of like complement each other, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I feel like it's sometimes it's easier to find a balance than others. I feel that
Mm,
this in particular has been a bit more challenging to find that balance, right? When either life or work takes a little bit more of the emphasis in your life, it can be a bit challenging. So, but I'm trying my best to not forget one aspect of myself or one hobby or one interest, because I've done it in the past, right? And sometimes we stop doing something that we really love, and then years later we're like, why did I stop doing that? That made me feel so
mm,
good and so fulfilled. So yeah,
yeah.
I kind of feed different aspects of who I am
Yeah.
and what I need. Mhm.
Yeah, I, I'm still absorbing here because you said a lot of interesting things there, and but at a high level, this idea of filling your cup with different things because they all bring different aspects to your life, and sort of being mindful of not letting them fall to the wayside or getting too tilted towards one side. Thank you for putting that out because it's so easy, right, to forget one or the other because you're different. It's the way different people mean different things in your life. That work and different hobbies and different experiences also bring different things, and that's what makes you whole. Um,
Exactly. Mhm. And I
so,
feel like we also help one another, right? So yeah.
mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. So, on that note, something I'm really interested to learn about from you, especially, is that how do you manage to balance all of that? Like, what would be your advice to somebody who's like struggling from burnout, for example, or from someone who's struggling like, fuck work, I don't want to ever work ever again, but I have to pay my bills. What would be your advice there?
I noticed that I also do it myself sometimes. Like we sometimes make ourselves believes that we don't have a choice, right? Or that we need to do something just because. And sometimes, yes, there are like, things that tie us to do certain things and that we are, stuck with it. But oftentimes it's just like in our own minds, right? And sometimes we just need like, no, these are my priorities now. Therefore, I'm going to do this first and then I'm going to do that. So I feel like being able to look at what are your priorities? what are your values? What is important to you right now? And then make the decisions based on that is something that has helped me, right? Because sometimes we are able to dedicate more time to like deep thinking and work. And sometimes it just not happening, right? And like even if we
Yeah.
force it, it's like it's not gonna happen. So in these situations as well, is being able to say like, okay, how important is this right now versus how important it is for me to find my space again so that I can do that, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
it's yeah, being able to observe a little bit like how are you making your decisions? Like what are your priorities and your values? And then which ones you actually have wiggle room, right? Um, because like sometimes I find myself like I'm like, oh, I need to finish this project by end of Thursday or Friday, right?
Yeah.
um have all this like pressure to do like 8 12 hours work days, and it's like, but do you really, right? Like do you really need to do that? Like is there anything that, do you actually have a real deadline that you need to hit, or like do you actually need to bring this report to this level of perfection in order for it to call it done, right? Is there something
Yeah.
else you can do or change so that you get to do what you need to do at the time? So I think that it's like having these conversations with yourself, and finding, like which kind of like chains you're putting on yourself sometimes versus which ones are real and which ones are not, right? So
Yeah. It's I like the idea of having a conversation with yourself and sort of self-reflecting, with being really mindful of the fact that I can step out and sort of analyze this and think about it. Love it. I love how you bring this curiosity mindset to everything on a very research nerd sort of level. But speaking of advice and thinking about the sum of your experiences, I'd love if you could share advice with folks who are looking to get into the UX research field for the first time. What is something you would share with them?
I think that to me, one of the things that helped me the most was find someone that believes in you. Like if you find someone that believes in you, that sees you, and they are like, I'm willing to dedicate time and effort to help you grow and to help you succeed. That, to me, that was the thing that helped the most, right? To have someone that was there for me when I needed it, especially at the beginning. So if you can find that mentor, find that sponsor, someone that is willing to step in and help you get where you want to get. That will be, yeah, that's always like my first go-to advice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let's see. Mm, yeah. I think that will be the most
Yeah.
important.
Thank
And
you
then
for that. Go
something
ahead. Go ahead.
something I was thinking a lot as well is that um, when I joined, or even now, right? Sometimes I was always scared of asking like too many questions, like to stakeholders, especially stakeholders who might have, you know, more years, more time, like tenure at a company, because I always felt like, maybe this question is like not, I don't know, smart enough or something like that. So it's like I would also tell people just like remove this worry. Like sometimes people don't even think about the questions that you ask, and even if they are the most obvious questions, just ask them, right? Don't be
Yeah.
afraid, just ask the questions even if they sound the most obvious ones, because yeah, you are helping other people like understand a problem. So, and sometimes like they people don't have a good sense of what that problem is, right? So I would also say,
Yeah.
don't be afraid of just being someone that just getting started. Ask the
Yeah.
questions. And most of us sometimes, like even me, I've been working as a UX research for a couple of years now, and I feel like sometimes, very often, I'm also like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and that is okay. So you can figure. It's like something that I
Yeah.
remember Liam always told me at the beginning, that it's a sentence I say to myself and I say to others is like, you got this, right? Even if you don't know it, you got this, you're gonna figure it out. So have that trust in yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about how I just asked that question, chances are also is that there's almost always one or more other people in the room who want to ask that question too, and when you finally say it, they're so relieved that somebody's asking that. You're I it's like the amount of times even I've held back. Sometimes even I'm like, should I say this? But you're
Mhm.
so right. Just ask it. Chances are someone else wants to know as well, and chances are it makes the person who's talking about whatever it might be in the room think about it from a different angle. It's so true. So on this sort of in the same spirit, in talking about advice for people trying to get into UX research, it and drawing from some of your experiences, is there anything you would call out separately for underrepresented communities?
So I think that the same advice applies. And then this is a tricky one, right? Because like I can speak to like my own identity, but that might not apply to other people who identify differently, right? I feel like for
Yeah,
me, like in a position of like privilege, right? A little bit as well, like being a white woman in tech, but like I feel like I have the freedom to speak up, and I feel like I have the freedom to say like, hey, I disagree with this, or I don't think that this is the right way, or I feel like this is not working for me for X, Y, or Z. Now, I understand that not everyone will feel like they are in a safe space to be able to do that, right? So I feel like finding that mentor or sponsor is still really important, but also I would say find a community of people within the company that you work or within your field that you can feel, that you can be vulnerable with if you need to, right? That you can be like, look, I'm really struggling with this, or like, this is shit. Why is this happening, right? Like that you can form those connections, because I think that this, like, when things go bad, having like a support system that can help you go through, difficult, challenging moments, it's going to be key, right? To help you continue moving. And especially like with, if you work in like an industry that there is not many people that look like you, not many people that maybe understand your position and your experience, finding those people that actually understand it or are willing to make the effort to understand it, I think that is going to be really key.
yes, like find your community, and whether it's at work or beyond that, because um, it does help to have someone in the room, whether it's in the actual room or not, but to like reflect back so they have that deep sense of understanding of where you're coming from. Um,
Yes. And
Last
also,
question in this theme. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say as well, like if you can also like, sometimes like companies have these surveys that talk about like how are we doing in terms of like diversity, inclusion. If you
Mm,
pay to provide feedback, that will be also key, right? Because that's something that I've added as well. Of like, you know what, this is something that I'm encountering in my work life that I feel like I'm the only woman in the room. And I'm like, that's kind of like not how I would envision 2024 tech world to look like, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, be if you can be able to provide feedback, because sometimes like either I don't know, people don't see it, people don't think about it, or people don't prioritize it. So being able to say like this is not okay, and I need to be able to, have people look different in this room.
And so, in this spirit, and this is a question I ask everyone in these conversations, when I talk about holding the door for future UXers, what does this mean to you?
I think that going back like to what I said of like for me, the reason where I am what I am today is because there were women who believed in me, right? Women that were like, Daria, could potentially become a good UX research. Let's give her a chance, right? I think that to me, holding the door for someone is making that space, right? Making that space and being like, okay, I feel like you're someone that I believe in, and I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to help you, I'm going to put you first if you need feedback. Like even if I need to do my own job, even if I need to get through the door, I'm going to make sure that you get through the door, you get the feedback that you need. I'm going to make the time for you so that you can thrive. And in addition to this, like I'm visualizing, right? Like what happens when you're trying to get through a door? Sometimes you have a coffee, it's uncomfortable, you need to navigate like a bunch of different stuff. So I feel like also to me, holding a door for someone is like making them feel more comfortable, right? It's like being able to make the space more comfortable for them to thrive, to be vulnerable, and to grow. And again, also provide them with this sense of comfort comes this idea of like give them positive encouragement, right? Make them feel that they got this, make them feel that they can do this, even if it's hard, right? So I feel like it's like many, many things. It's kind of like helping them get in, but once they are in, providing enough support and cushioning so that they get to thrive, because it's really scary when you're new to something and you feel like you're just being dropped there and you're like, how am I going to figure this out on my own? Right. So I think that it comes like multi-step process.
So true, you know. I never thought of it because yes, it's one thing to provide someone a gateway. It's another thing to assure they have sort of the toolkit they need to thrive. And thanks for pulling that out. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Okay, we're getting to the end here. Last question, I promise. Not that I know you don't mind nerding out with me all day, so thank you also for that. Um, okay, so I want to share an experience with you I had yesterday. So I was on a work trip, and on the way back, going to the airport, I was riding with some coworkers, and I happened to discover that one of my coworkers has picked up tarot over the last couple of years, and I've never been into this kind of stuff and all of that. But I was like, try and read my tarot for fun, right? But the first card she picked out for me has been, it was like eerily felt so real, where the first card she picked out to me has sort of been my theme for the year. And I'll share with you, like who I was listening what this card was, and she picked up a card which had a lot of cups, and I won't go into all the tarot stuff because it's like, you know, I would butcher it. But that's basically what the card was about, recognizing certain burdens and leaving them behind. And the visual, I know you especially will appreciate this, the visual was of this figure walking away from these really large cups that look, you know, heavy and made of gold and all of that, and like moving the fuck on. And for me, a big theme very personally has been figuring out what actually matters and leaving certain burdens behind. And it's been really important to me. And one of our mutual friends said this to me earlier this year, which has sort of like encapsulates all of this, right? In which he said, "Here's to a new journey. Here's to a new climb." And I just felt like all of that so beautifully came together with that card. So I want to turn it to you. If you had to visualize a tarot card or whatever, what has been your theme for the year and in keeping you going?
Mm. I think that one of the things that it's been like one of the themes would be navigating uncertainty and like challenges. I feel like sometimes it happens in many research practices, right? Or like many organizations, sometimes like there is a little bit of like an uncertainty due to like changes and things like that, right? And also that can lead to like challenges of like potentially like communicating with your colleagues or communicating with your stakeholders. So I feel like to me it's been like that's been some of the themes that I've experienced. And like how do you navigate that? Like how do you face that? Like how do you um, deal with that, right? And I feel that the image that came to my mind when I was thinking about this, so I saw the head of like human head, like abstract human head, and I saw like a question mark above it, and then the head had its mouth open and was trying to, like speak up some like stuff, like there were some symbols coming out of it and things like that. And then there was another head next to it, right, that was trying to comprehend that, right? So it's this idea of like, yeah, that is uncertainty, like how do we deal with it, but more importantly, how do we deal with it when we need to, communicate and work with the people that we have, well, the stakeholders or our direct working environment, right? Which can be challenging.
Okay, so
So
Daria, one of the questions you've been thinking about and which we think a lot about is the principles that sort of guide not only your life, but your work as well. So what would you say to that? What guides you?
mm, yes, so There are a couple that I can think of, right? Something that we chatted about, like this sense of curiosity, right? That's something that I feel like it's been always part of my life, very curious, this sense of like openness to new things, right? But I feel like the most important one for me would be like no bullshit, right? I absolutely cannot stand bullshit. And that happens in like many, many, many aspects, right? Or like many moments. So it could be like when you're having a conversation with someone and you feel that, they are just like giving you like fluff words, or like when they are doing like the corporate spiel on something, right? It's like I absolutely cannot stand that. Or like when you're like a research readout or a report and you're just like sharing fluff words, right? It's like no, no, no. Give
Yeah.
me the most important, key information here, and like the meaningful one, right? So I feel like this is like something that I feel like I live my life by. Is like, okay, how can we minimize the amount of like bullshit that comes, out of, my mouth or my reports or like the work that I do, and also my personal life.
Amazing. Minimize the bullshit. I have to write this down. Gonna put it right up there. I'm looking at my whiteboard that's right behind me because I've written Jason with Biofidgets, new journey, new climb. But right under that, going to write minimize the bullshit. It's so true. Thank you for that. Thanks for listening to the UX Ladder, Conversations Beyond Pixels, created by Mariam Khan, music by Ben Ewing.